Stress has always been a big part of my life for as far back as I can remember, even as a kid. I've learned to manage it in various ways over the years. One of those ways for me is to create. Whether that's working on side projects like making these videos, shooting and editing photos from walking adventures in San Francisco or other travels, to even little exercises in my sketchbook at home. I use multiple sketchbooks for different purposes, and I've shared many of them in sketchbook tour videos on this channel. A couple months ago, I started this one specifically for lettering and type sketches. I wanted to experiment and improve my lettering skills, so I'm using this sketchbook for that reason. But recently, I started using a smaller one, this B6 slim notebook by Muji made in Japan. I don't normally use small sketchbooks or work on small surfaces in general, but I'm using this one as an experiment. I want to lower the barrier of creating art. Instead of focusing on finished pieces or striving for perfection, I need a place I can essentially warm up in and truly not worry about how something looks, test art supplies, and make mistakes. In this video, I will share some of the ways I use a sketchbook for relaxation, for peace of mind, for unwinding after a long, stressful workday, or maybe just when you're experiencing low moods. You will not see amazing, completed works of art. That is not the point of this video. Instead, I want to encourage you to use up your many sketchbooks and art supplies to create a practice that soothes your soul and pushes your creativity. One way I like to loosen up in a sketchbook is drawing abstract patterns or shapes. It doesn't require a lot of thinking or mental energy. I'm keeping it simple by using one art supply, this blue 0.7 gel ink ballpoint pen from Muji, and here I am using circles to create a random pattern, then surrounding a group of circles with more until eventually they are all connected. I think I read or heard somewhere that drawing circles is therapeutic, so when in doubt, draw circles. Another idea, it doesn't have to only be line art with pen, like the circular patterns I created with the blue gel ink pen. You could also fill in shapes with colored pencils or markers. Here I'm using Tombow brush pen markers, playing around with color combinations and filling in a greater shape to make a pattern. Another simple way to relax and warm up is to test out some of your art supplies. I recently bought a bunch of new Tombow markers in various colors. This is another easy yet satisfying way to warm up in your sketchbook. It can also be a helpful resource when you're deciding which art supply or color to use later. I've noticed the caps on these markers are very deceiving and not true to color, so it's helpful to swatch them and see what it is. Something I've noticed with these markers, or using any markers in general, is the colors darken as you add another layer on top. So if you want a light fill of the color, keep that in mind. Usually seeing the streak patterns while layering with markers would drive my OCD crazy, but remember, the purpose of these sketchbook exercises are to loosen up and play, not perfection. Another thing I like to draw are a collection of objects within one theme. For example, a bunch of mini floral drawings as I'm doing here. I started by using a 0.3 fineliner black pen to create the outlines, and then I used different Tombow marker colors to go over the flowers and stems. Continuing with the nature theme, and if you really want to get immersed in sketching for relaxation, try a technique called Pointalism. This is where you fill an area with a multitude of tiny dots, and how you fill them in creates shading. For example, the more dots you have layered on top of each other, the darker the area will appear. The fewer and farther apart the dots are, the lighter the area will appear. If you're new to this technique, I recommend trying it out in a small area first. It can be intensive with all the mark making you're doing, but it can also be therapeutic when you start to get into the rhythm of it. Also, drawing the lines and details on leaves in botanical drawings can also be relaxing. Another form of sketching that helps relax me is architecture. San Francisco Victorian houses are one of my favorite styles of architecture, and I have no shortage of reference images I've shot myself in various parts of the city over the years. The key is to look at the lines and shapes that you see and break those down in your sketch. Focus on one detail at a time. Here I'm using a fineliner to create the outline and then add color with Tombow brush markers. Since this is all freeform sketching, I know that lines will be crooked and not line up, but that's not the purpose. It's to create something quickly. Here's another example of an architectural drawing I drew in mostly red pen. This one has a lot of windows, so I definitely got lost in the repetition of all the shapes and lines. I added a few highlights to the windows with a brush marker to finish it off. For these more laid-back sketchbook sessions, I try to lean into speed, create loose and quick sketches of really anything. Here I'm creating more swatches of color and adding a bit of cursive handwriting on top to see how the two interact. I also created some quick lettering pieces like this one with a thick brush marker. I didn't like how part of it turned out for the second word, so I used the brush marker to black it out and then started over with a metallic silver marker to layer on top. You can use reference images if you're not sure what to draw, although be careful, you might go down the rabbit hole of searching the internet for the best reference images and never actually start sketching. Here, I'm moving quickly through pages in my sketchbook, trying out different combinations of art supplies, not worrying about creating perfect lines or filling shapes completely. So those are all of my tips for how I draw and use a sketchbook for relaxation, to let go of art expectations and overall boost my creativity. I hope you take something away from this video and put it into practice. If you're interested in more sketchbook videos, check out one of these next.